In this video, you'll learn why the static mix is so important, as well as how to volume balance and pan your tracks to achieve a great static mix. So keep watching if you want to nail the most important step of the mixing process. But first, download the free volume balancing cheat sheet. There's a link in the bio or on screen now. Alright guys, how's it going? Rob here from Musician on a Mission. Now the static mix is so important because it's where you set the foundation for everything else. But instead of telling you why it's so important, let me just show you. Take a listen to this track unmixed, and warning, this is going to sound horrific. Okay, so keep that sound in mind, because what we're going to do now is mix this together and we'll go back and compare later. Now, there are two key elements to the static mix: volume balance and panning. Let's start with volume balancing. So my preferred approach is to just bring every single channel down right to the bottom of the fader and then bring things in order of importance. So generally that means I set the lead vocal to 0 and I start balancing in everything else around it. I call this balancing in height order because we're starting with the element that we want to be the tallest or the loudest in the mix. And when you bring everything else in, again in order of importance, we're just setting them at lower levels than that tallest element. There is an approach that's the exact opposite of this, but we're going to come back to that later. In this track, this genre, kind of indie folk, pop vibes, the vocal is obviously the most important thing. So let's start with that. And what I'm going to do now is put on my headphones and just start balancing this in front of you. So in order of importance, I'm probably going to go after the vocal for maybe the acoustic guitar or the snare. So far, the only plugins I have in this mix are some gain plugins for some gain staging, a bit of vocal riding and automation so that it's easier to actually balance in the mix. And that's it. Let's just have a look.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things to say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I should have told you yesterday. To say the things that might just help me.
So already we've got some of the harmony instruments there, the acoustic guitars go in. I think next, a big part of this, just from listening to it unmixed, is the percussion. There's lots of claps and it's quite kind of cutesy in that regard. So let's start bringing those in.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a
Now, when you're balancing lots of individual elements, whether that's a whole drum kit or claps, it's okay to go into solo or just solo that group of instruments to get the balance right. That already sounds quite natural to me. Obviously, if it was a drum kit with a snare and a kick, and at this point I wanted to bring in the drum kit, then I'd probably solo the kit for a while to get the balance within the kit right, and then balance that kit in the context of the track. But here, that already sounds good, so let's move on.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I should have told you yesterday. To say the things that might just help me understand. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I should have told you.
What you might have also noticed here is that I'm looping the loudest section of the song, but it's quite a short chorus. So I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to loop this section as well. And we can always come back to the last chorus later because we want to mix the last chorus first. That's the bit we want to sound biggest, but sometimes it's nice to just move around while you're getting the balance.
And so starving, darling, for your touch. I didn't.
Don't be afraid to mute channels as well. Right now, I'm really not liking the vibe of this kick ambient, so I'm just going to mute that and balance in the kick.
And so starving, darling, for your touch. I didn't know that I could miss someone this much, but there's gotta be a better way.
Before I start balancing these backing vocals, I'm just going to send them all to a bus. So you can either start bussing things before you start balancing, which is generally what I like to do, especially with big projects like this. So we could have like a BV bus, we can then have a lead vocal bus, etc. So I'm just going to go and set that up now. So now if I want to solo a group of instruments, I can just solo the group bass, and later on if I want to add EQ, for example, to all the backing vocals, which is the way I'm going to mix this. I'm not going to EQ each one individually. I'll get a good balance going, then I'll EQ the whole group. So that's all set up now. We can solo that backing vocal bass and start balancing these in. And I'm probably going to start adding some panning here as well. Now that we're getting into the backing vocals, which there are a lot of, I'm going to start panning some hard left, some hard right. That's my general approach, with maybe one or two things in the whole mix panned about halfway. Now that they're all at the same level, I'm just going to listen out, see if any of them are poking out. And since they're now panned hard left and hard right, it's easier to do that. You could just go through and solo them. But to me, it's already sounding pretty balanced. So now let's go to another backing vocal part.
Things I should have told you. Things I should have told you. I should have told you yesterday.
Some of these parts seem like they might interact with the lead vocal, so I'm just going to unsolo the backing vocals now and continue balancing them.
Things I should have told you yesterday. 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 Things I should have told you yesterday.
So those hays are a little quiet, so let's dial those in now.
To say the things that might just
and start panning some of them.
To say the things that might
It's sounding a little bit heavier on one side, so let's just solo these and balance them together and tighten this loop. Let's see how that sounds before we get sick of hearing that over and over again.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you yesterday. Things I should have told you yesterday.
Let's start bringing in other elements now. Before we spend too long focusing on just one part before everything's in, we want to get to the point where we're bringing everything in kind of at a good level, and then we can fine tune it.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better say the things I should have told you yesterday. Things I should have told you yesterday.
I'm going to go back to a bit more of a climax to dial this in. So let's go to that last chorus again.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I to say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have.
Starting to get a bit messy now. There's a lot going on in this mix, so I'm going to start panning things a bit more to create a bit more space and separation.
To say the things that might gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I should to say the things.
Now let's just check we've got everything in. Looks like it. So there was that one ambience channel that we muted that we'll come back to. But now that everything's in, we can start fine tuning this, put in more panning. So all these claps need panning as well. So you can see I'm just going hard left, hard right, and then I'll put maybe one or two things halfway either side.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I should to say the things that might just help me understand. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes.
So there's this kind of guitar lay that I'm going to put halfway to the right in its own little space because it's got a really nice sound, and the same with that slide guitar.
To say the things that might just help me understand. Be a better way to say them. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things I should have told you. Yes, the things I.
Okay, so we're getting there. So I would normally spend a lot longer on this, especially with a project with a lot of channels like this one. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to move on now to a few other things, but just be aware that I'm probably going to spend that same amount of time again, just fine-tuning this, maybe even longer, just making sure this is really dialed in, because this is where so much of the mix comes from. One thing you can do to help with the static mix is start pulling in references. So I can actually compare this to tracks and listen to how loud is the vocal in comparison to the snare, how loud are the backing vocals in comparison to the lead vocal, etc. So let's just pull in some references now. So I've got a couple of references here now. I've balanced the volume so that we're not listening to the references louder or our mix louder. And let's just have a comparison now. I want you to actually think about what the differences are in the balance, what are potential ways to improve the balance that we've got with this track based on how loud the individual elements are on the references, and focus on the vocal most of all and how that relates to the percussion, the backing vocals, that kind of stuff.
There's gotta be a better way to say the thing. Oh, 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. Oh, lady, a better way to say the thing. To say the things that might just help me down to midnight, my dear. But it was not. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a open mind. To say the things that might just way to say the things.
So there's a few things that I'm hearing. First of all, I think the kick can come up. That plays a really important role. Maybe the acoustic can come up as well. That's just as loud as the lead vocal, really core focus. And then besides that, I think just there's a few general issues that need fine-tuning. The claps are still a little bit too loud, and that will just come from the process of fine-tuning this balance. So let's dial in a few of those big issues now.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better. To say the things that might just help me understand. To say the things that might just help me. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things. To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better.
Let's try bringing in this kick ambience track as well to see if that helps fill out that kick a bit.
To say the things that might just help me understand you. There's gotta be a better way to say the things. To say the things that might just help me understand you.
So you've seen me adjust these gain plugins a couple of times. That's because I initially cut some of that gain to make sure the channels weren't too hot, but now I'm struggling to get the volume up to where I need it. So I can try just add in a bit more gain there. If the channel gets too hot again, I'll have to turn up the bus or turn down everything else to compensate. But that's getting there. So references really help. Again, spending longer fine-tuning this. The other thing you'll need to do once you've got a good balance on the climax of the song is go back and add volume automation to the other parts, because maybe now in the verse a certain part is too loud. Let's have a listen.
Well, I've been so starving, darling, for your touch. I didn't know that I could miss someone this much, but there's gotta be a better.
So the slide guitar there is a little bit too loud. The acoustic can also come up. It seems like whoever's playing the acoustic is playing a lot softer during the verse, but we need that to really fill out the space there. So we can bring up the acoustic with a bit of automation, bring down the slide guitar, which I believe was this one. Let's have a listen and see if that's better.
Darling, for your touch, I I didn't know that I could win.
Getting there.
Well, I've been so starving, darling, for your touch. Well, I've been so starving, darling, for your touch. I didn't know, darling, for your touch. I didn't.
So you have to go through an add automation like this. Now I normally do that towards the end of the mix. So to break it down, it starts with the static mix with panning, looping the loudest section. Then what I'll do is actually switch to mono once I've got a good static mix and add compression, EQ, all my main mixing plugins to that loudest section. And then I'll start adding effects, and that's when I flick back into stereo. And then finally, after all of that, I'll move back to the other sections and add volume automation like you just saw me doing there. But I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, because you generally find when you get a great static mix in the main chorus, it doesn't necessarily translate to the rest of the track. Now I've just got a few questions that I want to address that I've had a few times about volume balancing and creating this static mix. First of all, how do you choose the most important element? Quite often it will be the vocals, but in many cases it's not as obvious. In a lot of dance music, maybe the kick drum is more important than the vocal if it's just a sample. Maybe the guitar is more important if it's a kind of lead guitar rock track. Really, you just need to sit down and figure out, well, what is the main hook of this song? Is it the vocal? Is it the fact that people want to dance to it? So the kick drum is almost like the hook. It needs to be loud. I'm going to pull up another mix now, have a listen and see what you think is the most important element. So again, this hasn't been balanced yet, so it's going to sound pretty bad, but let's just see if we can figure out what the most important element is. So we've got that vocal sample, the Got Your Love, which is important. It's a hook of some sort. It'll probably play through your mind. Who's got your love tonight? But then as soon as we get into this chorus, it's a very different vibe. There's no vocal. So the question is, well, how do you want this track to be perceived by most people? Do you want to make the kick drum the most important element so that we really get people dancing? Or maybe it's actually the bass synth that's more important in creating that groove. Equally, in this track, I personally think there's a better hook in the synth part. That's pretty hooky to me, so I'd probably start with that and then bring in the kick. Get those two elements really working. Next, bring in the bass, and then that means we've got all the core elements balanced well and we can bring in everything else to fit around it. Next question, is it better to do volume balancing on headphones or monitor speakers? Hey man, do whatever you want. Headphones, monitors, it really doesn't matter. What are your thoughts on working backwards and leaving the most important element as the last thing? So I have heard of this. Some people find that the thing they balance last, i.e. the vocal, actually ends up being the loudest. I have a slightly different approach because this more relates to my mixing workflow, where if the vocal is actually really important, I'll maybe mix it a little bit too. Not just balance it, but also dial in some EQ compression and then kind of shape everything else around it. Honestly, there's no right answer, just try both. Try starting with the vocal and then shaping everything else around it, which is my preferred approach, or bring in the vocal last to kind of make it sit on top. Give it a try. And lastly, how does this style of balancing compare to using pink noise? Personally, I'm really not a fan of the pink noise technique. I think it completely defeats the point of balancing, where we don't want everything to be the same volume. We want the vocal to be a bit louder. And I understand that the pink noise trick means that you have a nice spread across frequencies. So generally you'll turn up the bass to the right point compared to the vocal, etc. But I think it's way more subjective than that. You can't really use something objective like pink noise, it's quite scientific, for something that's actually very artistic and requires a lot of subjective input when you're balancing these different channels. So it might be a good way to just get a really rough balance going if you prefer to have everything up and then start tweaking, but I prefer to just bring things in one at a time like I've shown you here. And for anyone that doesn't know what that trick is, it's basically where you just have pink noise playing really loud, like and then you balance everything in so that you can actually hear it. It's a weird technique. Okay, that's it. We are done here. Static mix, that's how you ace it every time. Now you need to actually go and apply this. We've covered quite a lot here and it's such an integral part of the mixing process. If you want your mixes to sound good, you need to get the initial static mix right. So I put together a cheat sheet that will walk you through this process. You can use it next time you mix to make sure you ace it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. So that's all from me. I'm Rob from Musician on a Mission, and remember, create regardless.